Crystal flutes clinked above my head like 1,000 tiny bells, but the only sound I could really hear was my own pulse, slow and steady, the way it gets when I'm 3 minutes from closing a case. The Vandermeer estate had been rented out for the day. White peonies imported from Ecuador, a string quartet from Juilliard, a custom ice sculpture of 2 swans whose necks formed a heart, slowly weeping itself into a silver tray. My mother had insisted on the swans. She said they represented eternal devotion, which is a phrase she has never once applied to me. I was standing near the back of the garden in the navy slip dress I'd bought specifically because it had pockets deep enough to hide a phone. My sister Brielle was at the front of the aisle in a Vera Wang she didn't pay for, holding hands with a man who had been under federal surveillance for 11 months. And my mother, in champagne silk and her grandmother's pearls, was tapping a butter knife against her glass. I knew what was coming. I'd known for 6 days, ever since I'd intercepted the email between her and the title company. But hearing it out loud in front of 200 people was still going to be its own kind of theater. She raised her glass. Her voice did that thing it always does when she's performing maternal warmth. It goes a half octave too high, like she's reading a Hallmark card to a stranger. She said that today was about more than vows. She said today was about Loker. She said that as a wedding present to her precious daughter and her wonderful new son-in-law, she wanted to give a gift that reflected what family truly meant. And then she said it. She was transferring the deed to the Halcyon Tower penthouse, the one with the river view, the one I had bought 4 years ago, with money I'd earned by sleeping 4 hours a night for most of my 20s. The crowd gasped. And then they applauded, and then they did that horrible little, "Oh, isn't that beautiful" collective sigh that rich people do when they're being told a story about generosity. Brielle covered her mouth with both hands and leaned into her new husband's chest. Her new husband, Davis, gave a tight, pleased little nod, like a man being handed exactly what he'd ordered. My mother beamed. And me? I took a slow sip of my Prosecco and didn't move. Before I tell you how I dismantled my own family and the time it took the caterers to bring out the entree, do me a favor, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I want to see how far this story carries. Tell me your city. I read every single one. Now, I want you to understand something about me before we go any further, because the rest of the story doesn't make sense unless you do. My name is Tamsin. I'm 31 years old. To my mother, I'm the one who's good with spreadsheets. To my sister, I'm the boring one. To the partners at my firm, I'm the woman they bring in when a corporate client thinks their CFO is moving money to the Caymans through a shell company in Delaware. I'm a forensic accountant. I've testified in front of 2 grand juries. I have a cooperating relationship with a particular field office of the Bureau that I'm not going to name on camera, but the agents there know my coffee order and I know theirs. I don't get angry. I get organized. And I had been organized about Davis Halverin for the better part of a year. He'd come into my sister's life 18 months ago at a charity gala, the kind of charity gala where the actual charity gets about 6 cents on the dollar and the rest goes to the open bar. He was charming. He had a watch that cost more than most people's down payments. He told everyone he was in private equity, which in his case meant he had a website, and a LinkedIn, and a habit of moving large amounts of other people's money through a chain of LLCs registered in 3 different states. The problem was, my sister had eaten it up. Brielle has been hungry her whole life. Not for food. God knows my mother fed her every want before it could fully form into a sentence. But for the appearance of having arrived. She wanted the apartment, the car, the husband, the wedding announcement in the right magazine. She dropped out of 2 graduate programs and started 3 businesses that all collapsed within a year, and she had, at last count, around $420,000 in personal debt. Most of it credit card and personal loans she'd taken out against the future earnings of the failed businesses. I knew the exact number because she'd come to me crying about it 8 months ago. Sat in my kitchen, mascara running, asking if I could loan her enough to consolidate. I'd said no, not because I didn't have it, because giving Brielle money is like pouring water into a colander and asking it to remember. She left my apartment that night, and 3 weeks later she was engaged to Davis. She told me he was old money. She told me he came from Halverin Industries. There is no Halverin Industries. I checked. There is a Halverin Holdings LLC registered in Wyoming with a single member who is also the registered agent, and a mailing address that is, I kid you not, a UPS store in Cheyenne. So when my mother started talking, 6 days before the wedding, about how she wanted to do something special for the couple, and when I noticed an email from a title company in her sent folder, yes, I had access to her email. She's been using the same password since 2009. It's the name of our childhood dog I knew. She was going to forge my signature on a quitclaim deed and transfer my penthouse to the bride and groom as a wedding gift, and she was going to do it publicly, in front of 200 witnesses, so that I would have no socially acceptable way to object. She had done versions of this my whole life. When I was 16, I'd saved up for 2 summers to buy a used Honda Civic. I came home from work one night, and the car was in Brielle's spot. My mother said Brielle's needed it more, because she was on the cheer squad and had to get to practice. I rode the bus to my college visits. When I got into Wharton on full scholarship, my mother told the extended family at Christmas that she'd helped me get there. When I cleared my first 100,000, she asked me if I'd thought about helping pay off Brielle's student loans, since you don't really have anyone to spend it on. The thing about parasites, and you'll forgive me, I know that word is harsh, but I've had a long time to think about this, is that they don't see themselves as parasites. They see themselves as the immune system. They believe, deep in their bones, that they are correcting an imbalance, that you having something they want is itself the injustice. So my mother stood at that microphone and announced she was giving away my home, and she did not feel like a thief. She felt like a saint. She finished her toast. The crowd cheered. A waiter materialized with a black leather portfolio. Inside, I knew, was the quitclaim deed, and inside that envelope was the forged version of my signature she practiced. I'd seen the legal pad in her study. 3 pages of attempts. Brella reached for the portfolio. Davis was already pulling a fountain pen from his jacket pocket. A Mont Blanc. Of course, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened it, just to make sure the recording app was still running. It was. It had been running for 38 minutes. I walked toward them. My mother saw me coming, and her face did this little flicker, that micro-expression she gets when she's about to have to manage me. She intercepted me near the dessert table, hooking her arm through mine like we were the closest of friends, and steered me behind a wisteria trellis where the photographer couldn't see us. She squeezed my arm hard enough that I knew I'd have a bruise the next morning. She said in a low, sharp voice that I was making a face. She said I needed to fix it. She said people were watching. I told her I was watching too. She didn't blink. She tilted her head, the way she does when she's about to deliver one of her speeches. And then she gave me the speech I'd been waiting my entire adult life to hear out loud. She said, "Thompson, look at you. You have everything. You have your apartments and your firm and your accounts. You don't need that penthouse. You're never even there. You sleep at the office half the time. Your sister has nothing. Your sister has dreams. Your sister is starting a family. Davis is a good man, but men like that come with expectations. If she walks into that marriage with an asset, she has security. She has standing. And if you weren't so selfish, you would have offered it yourself." She said the word selfish the way other women say cancer. And then she pulled out a cross pin. She said I was going to walk over to that table, and I was going to smile, and I was going to be a witness on the deed, and I was going to validate this gift. Because if I embarrassed the family in front of the Halverins, she would never, ever forgive me. I looked at the pen. I looked at my mother. For one strange, almost weightless second, I felt the old pull. The little girl version of me who used to lie awake at night and try to figure out what she could do, what she could become, what she could earn, that would finally make this woman love her. That girl is still in there somewhere. She's quieter now. But she's there. Then I thought about the email I'd gotten on Tuesday from Special Agent Reyes, with the subject line just reading, "Confirmed wire transfer Tuesday." I smiled at my mother. I told her she was right. I told her Brielle deserved this. Her shoulders dropped about 2 inches. Her face softened into something almost tender. She actually cupped my cheek. Her hand was cold from holding her champagne flute. She said, "Good girl." I took the pen. I walked out from behind a trellis, and I crossed the lawn toward the head table, and I felt every step like a metronome. The string quartet was playing a Vivaldi piece my sister had picked because she thought it sounded classy. The sun was sliding sideways through the wisteria. Davis was bent over the portfolio, the deed laid out in front of him, and he had that little flush in his neck that men get when they think they're about to win. I stepped up beside him. I said brightly that Mom had told me the news and that this was the most generous gift I'd ever seen. Davis lifted up. He searched my face for one beat too, and he saw what he expected to see. The boring sister, the good one, the one who plays along. He smiled. He uncapped his pen. I leaned in, just a little, and I said, "Lock it in, Davis. A property like that doesn't come around twice." He laughed. A quick, nervous laugh, more relief than humor, and he signed. The fountain pen scratched on the paper. His name, his real name, in his real handwriting, on a quitclaim deed accepting transfer of a property held by an LLC he'd been wiring laundered funds through for the past 9 months. He kept the pen. He smiled at me. He said, "Done." I said, "Done." My mother clapped her hands together once, sharp and triumphant, and called for the waiters to refill the champagne. She raised her glass. She announced in that ringing performance voice that we should all toast to the happy couple and to their beautiful new home. 200 glasses went up. I let my voice cut clean through it. I said, "Actually, you're going to want to hold that toast." The garden went quiet. Not respectful quiet. The other kind. The kind of quiet that happens when something is about to go wrong in front of a lot of cameras. My mother's smile froze. She hissed my name through her teeth. I set my phone down on the head table, face up, and I tapped the screen. I said, "Agent Reyes, you getting all this?" The voice came back, calm and clear, and amplified by the speakerphone for 200 guests to hear. "Yes, ma'am." Visual confirmation. "We have audio of the verbal acceptance and we have the signature." Davis's pen rolled out of his hand. It hit the china and made a small, polite, expensive sound. He said, "Who is that?" I told him. I told all of them. I said that the gentleman on the line was a special agent with the financial crimes section of a federal investigative agency, that I had been a cooperating consultant on his investigation for the better part of a year, and that the Halcyon Tower Penthouse was registered to an LLC called Marigold Atlas Holdings, which was, in plain English, a honeypot, a property held in the open specifically to track the inflow and outflow of funds connected to a wire fraud and money laundering investigation involving a particular import-export operation, routing payments through Wyoming shell companies. I said, "Davis, that import-export operation is yours." He went the color of skim milk. My mother lunged for the phone. I caught her wrist before she got there. I'd never touched her like that in my life. She actually flinched. I said evenly, "Mom, you forged my signature on a quitclaim deed. That's a Class C felony in this state. You did it across state lines because the title company is in Connecticut. That's wire fraud. That's federal. I have the email you sent the title company. I have the practice signatures from the legal pad in your study. I have the recording of you telling me 20 minutes ago that I was being selfish for not letting you give my home away." Davis was trying to grab the deed, trying to rip it. He got it folded once, twice, before I leaned across the table and put my hand flat over the paper. I said very gently, "Davis, the deed doesn't matter. The notary log matters. The transfer was electronically registered with the county recorder's office at 4:17 this afternoon. You signed a binding acceptance of property from an entity you knew was under federal scrutiny. That's not a wedding gift. That's a RICO predicate. I had practiced that sentence in my car on the way over. I'm not too proud to admit it." His knees actually buckled. He caught himself on the back of his chair. Brielle was standing now too. Her bouquet was on the ground, petals everywhere. She was looking back and forth between Davis and my mother and me, like a child trying to figure out which adult had broken the lamp. She said my name. Just once, like a question. I looked at her. I didn't hate her in that moment. I want to be clear about that. I don't think I've ever really hated Brielle. She's the product of being told her whole life that she was extraordinary by a woman who needed her to be, in order to justify the cost of raising her. Brielle is a story my mother tells herself. She always has been. But I also wasn't going to lie to her. I said, "Brielle, you knew. Maybe not the federal part, but you knew this was my home. You knew Mom didn't have the right to give it to you, and you wanted it anyway." She started to cry. Real crying, the ugly kind, mascara everywhere. She said she didn't know about Davis. About the money. She said it over and over. I believed her about Davis. I didn't believe her about the rest. The agents came in through the side gate. 2 of them. They were in suits, not vests. Reyes had asked me, as a favor, to keep it as quiet as possible because there were a lot of older guests and he didn't want a scene worse than necessary. He's a kind man, actually. We've worked 5 cases together. He read Davis his rights at the head table in a low voice, while the string quartet stood frozen in the corner with their bows still up. Davis didn't fight. He just kept blinking, like he was trying to wake up. Reyes turned to my mother. He said very politely that he was going to need her to come with him to answer some questions about a forged instrument. He said she wasn't under arrest at this time. He said the word yet without saying it. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were huge and wet, and she was, for the first time in maybe my entire life, genuinely afraid. She said, Tamsin, fix this. Tell him it's a misunderstanding. I picked up my Protocco. I took a sip. The bubbles had gone flat. I said, Mom, I audit people like you for a living. I don't represent them. She started to say something else, and then she stopped, because there wasn't anything else to say. I walked out. I walked across that lawn past 200 people who had spent the last hour applauding my own dispossession, past the swan ice sculpture which had melted enough that one swan's neck had collapsed onto the silver tray, past the valet, who took one look at my face and ran for my car without me having to say a word. I tipped him $40. He deserved it. My mother caught up with me at the curb. She'd kicked off her heels somewhere, and she was running barefoot on the gravel. Her pearls were swinging. She grabbed my arm. She said I owed her. She said she'd raise me. She said I wouldn't be anything without her. She tried to slap me. I caught her hand. I held it for a second. I looked at her. I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, who had fed me, who had braided my hair before school pictures, who had also drained my college fund and taken my car and given my home away on a Saturday afternoon in front of 200 strangers. And I felt, and this is the strangest part, the part I keep coming back to, I felt nothing in particular. I felt the way I feel when I close out a long-running file. There's no triumph. There's no relief. There's just the quiet click of a folder being moved into the archive. I let go of her hand. I told her goodbye. I got in the car. I locked the doors. She stood on the gravel in her bare feet, and she watched me drive away. And in my rearview mirror, she got smaller and smaller. And then the road curved and she was gone. I didn't go home. I didn't have a home that night, technically. The penthouse was still a federal asset, sealed pending the outcome of the case, and I wasn't allowed to sleep there until the prosecution closed. I drove to my office. I have a couch. I keep a toothbrush in my desk. I've slept there before. I sat in the parking garage for a long time before I went up. I thought about being 8 years old, and Brielle being 5, and the two of us in the bathtub together, and her trying to pour shampoo on my head because she wanted to wash me like Mom did. I thought about how she used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I thought about how, somewhere along the way, our mother had taught her that I existed to provide for her, and she had simply believed it, the way a child believes anything an adult says often enough. I thought about whether I should have given her a chance. I decided I had given her 1,000 chances. I had given her my car. I had given her my time. I had paid off one of her credit cards 2 years ago and watched her run the balance back up in 8 months. I had said no exactly one time, about one consolidation loan, and 3 weeks later she'd let our mother forge my name on a deed to my home. You only have to be told who someone is so many times before believing them is a kindness you owe yourself. I went upstairs. I deleted my mother's number. I deleted my sister's number. I blocked them on every platform I could think of. It took about 14 minutes. My fingers were very steady the whole time. Then I sat down on the couch in my office, and I took off my heels, and I stared at the ceiling, and I waited to feel something, and what I felt, eventually, after about an hour, was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. For the first time since I was old enough to understand what was being taken from me, no one was reaching for my pockets. No one was rehearsing a speech about why I owed them. No one was looking at my life and doing the math on what they could extract. The silence was mine. Davis took a plea. 11 years, federal, no parole. The Penthouse case helped close out a money laundering operation that had been running through 3 states and had, at final count, moved a little over $60 million. My mother was charged with forgery and uttering a forged instrument. She got probation and restitution because she's 68 years old, and because the U.S. attorney decided the optics of jailing a grandmother weren't worth the 4 months they'd get her for. Brielle had her marriage annulled. She's living with our mother now, in the house I grew up in. And they are, from what I hear, through cousins not getting along. A cousin asked me, last Christmas, if I was ever going to forgive them. I told her I already had. Forgiveness, I told her, doesn't mean you let them back in the building. Forgiveness means you stop carrying the bill. I bought a new place last spring, not a penthouse this time. A little brownstone in a quiet neighborhood with a yard that gets morning sun and a kitchen with a window over the sink. I planted tomatoes, they didn't take. I'm trying again this year. Sometimes, when I'm out at the sink washing a coffee cup, I think about that swan ice sculpture, and the way one of its necks had collapsed by the end of the afternoon, and how nobody at that wedding noticed except me. I notice things. It's what I'm good at. That's the whole story. Tell me where you're listening from. I really do read them all. I've thought a lot, in the quiet years since that afternoon at the Vandermeer, about how a person ends up the way my mother ended up. She wasn't born cruel. I have pictures of her at 23 holding me on a hospital bed, and her face in those pictures is soft in a way I never saw in person. Something happened between then and the woman who stood at a microphone and gave my home away. I don't fully understand it, and I've stopped trying to. What I do understand is that every choice she made, year after year, decade after decade, was a small one. Take the car, drain the fund, tell the family she'd helped me. Each one on its own was the kind of thing she could explain away to herself before she went to sleep. And the trouble with small wrong choices is that they compound, the way interest does. You wake up one morning and you forged your own daughter's signature on a deed, and you genuinely cannot remember how you got from here to there. The math just ran in the background of your life until the balance came due. I think Brielle is on the same road. I hope she gets off it. I'm not the one who can tell her how. What that whole experience taught me, and I mean really taught me, not the kind of lesson you put on a coffee mug, is that being good to people is not the same thing as being available to them. I had spent a long time confusing those two. I thought love meant I was supposed to keep showing up, keep saying yes, keep absorbing the cost, because that's what good daughters did. That's what good sisters did. And the more I gave, the more the system around me adjusted to expect it, the way a body adjusts to a medication and needs a higher dose the next year. The day I said no to Brielle's loan was the day my real life started. I just didn't know it yet. There's a kind of strength I didn't know I had until I needed it. It wasn't loud. It didn't feel like fighting back. It felt like patience. It felt like sitting in a parked car at 4 a.m, drinking cold coffee, building a case file on my own family, and not letting myself look away from what I was seeing. Anyone can walk away in a rage. Walking away clearly, with your paperwork in order, is a different muscle entirely, and you only build it by using it. If you're listening to this and you recognize something, the favored sibling, the parent who calls your success selfishness, the family that treats your wallet like a shared utility, I want you to hear me. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Loving someone does not obligate you to fund their bad decisions. And the day you stop confusing guilt for love is the day the rest of your life finally has room to start. I planted those tomatoes again this spring. 2 of them came in.